So I think we're all here, and the only thing on our agenda is for Suzanne to present her High Plains strategy report. And if no one has anything, we'll just turn it over to you, Suzanne.
Sorry, okay. You're just a little closer. Okay, I think Bonnie's given you the report. I set out to do 12, it's quite a bit longer than that, but I actually really enjoyed doing the project, so I appreciate the opportunity. I learned a lot, and I think that there's a lot of really great stuff in here. The thing that I would kind of say about this document is it's obviously not the solution. It's a decision document and discussion document, so I chose data that I felt like would give y'all the tools that you need to make some decisions about kind of what you think the EDC needs to be working on. So that's kind of the background for that. It's, you know, data is data, it's facts, so it's an honest picture of where we are in terms of Spearman. It's from, I used only federal sources for the data, so census, TEA, the Texas for Education data, the comptroller. So all of the data in this presentation is going to have come from one of those kind of government sources. And then my job was just to bring it all together, and then I give you my thoughts on what I think it means, and then you get the exciting job, which is deciding what you want to do with it. So it's easy on these kinds of presentations to get caught up in whether the numbers are right or not. So think of it more as a directional document that's helping to kind of show us where we are, where we're headed, versus there's several ways that you can get a census number and things like that. It'll be more productive and more helpful for you if you'll focus on kind of the directions of where the numbers are taking us. If y'all want, we can just go page by page, or we can talk about specific sections of it. I don't know, Ginger, do you have a preference?
I don't.
Okay.
Does anybody else have a preference?
Well, I'll just kind of go page by page. I won't explain it in depth, but if you've got questions, we can ask it that way. So there's basically 5 parts to this presentation. Part 1 is what the data, the actual data itself. Part 2 is kind of a synthesis of what the data tells us. Part 3, I give y'all a couple of realistic options on kind of where you can take this data in terms of directions for the city. And then in part 4 and 5, we'll kind of talk about like next steps for the board and for your director. So obviously part 1, data. And I will say on just kind of a little bit of understanding of the census, you know, which y'all probably know, but just for the record, the census collects actual data every 10 years on citizens. But then they also put out these 5-year data studies where they kind of make predictions about that. So I went ahead and used the 2024 estimate, but so it's not off of the 2020 data or census, it's off of the 2024 estimate. It's most of what the data in this project, in this presentation is.
So
a little fresher.
2020 was COVID. Did they, I know for sure that was back during a period when people went into isolation. I mean, do they feel like there's a relevancy to the 2020 census?
I really haven't heard any of that, so I think at some level you just accept it. It's the census, you just accept it. Now, there's always an undercount in the census, frankly, and especially in a community like ours, which we're gonna see highly like a Hispanic community, like we're gonna have undercount. So that's where there's a little variation. And so what's great about putting all this data together like this is that we don't have to rely on one set of data to know what's happening in the community. So you can sort of say, well, that census number may not be perfect, but it matches up with what's happening at the school or what's happening with our workforce. Or, so you can sort of see a big picture by and so that's why I say, think about this kind of in the bigger picture. These numbers are important because they tell us things, but they're not necessarily, there's not one set of data that's gonna tell us exactly, where we are or what we're doing. So I think that by using 2024, we're getting a little bit more of a, like, current picture of where we are. Now, obviously, it's 26, but that's the latest kind of data that's available. So our number in the 2024 estimate is 2810. That's actually 361 people down from 2020. So that's a pretty significant number. 11% actually is that change from 2020 to 2024. That lines up with what you see at the school. Since 2000, they have dropped 215 students. That's all right. 215, 920 to 647. 647 is the current number at the school district. So a pretty big drop in where we are. And I actually verified that number yesterday with Mr. Lehman. And then it shows that 124 people left between 23 and 24. So I guess the population trend data that's important is that we're losing people slowly, but that loss is, accelerating. Any questions about that? Kind of the highlight of it. It is what it is, I guess. The school numbers, very concerning, and we can talk about that more in the presentation, but from like what I hear at other like school districts, because I've obviously been following education pretty closely, once you get to that 600 range number, that is when your financial starts to flip. And actually Stratford's dealing with that now, to where your cost to run a school sort of outweighs a big, like a kind of a real rural district like Spearman has. So that number is definitely something that we need to pay attention to. So the next slide is economy. Sales tax, we collect, this was 2024 number, 737,000. That's about 13,000 in spending per capita. The census business study shows we have 115 employers. That's actually up from 2010. So it's growing but slow. And then it shows we have a $42 million annual payroll. I did a little comparison of sales tax with kind of some of our peer and neighbors. Perryton obviously is a regional hub and a lot bigger population. They generate about $3 million in taxes. Canadian is the same size as us, and they have strong oil and gas, and they come in just above us at 800,000. Panhandle's pretty close, although they are close to Amarillo, so they probably lose, a lot of shoppers to that. Stratford and then Pitt River on there, quite a bit smaller, but that's their number. So what this really shows us is that we actually do have pretty strong kind of local kind of shopping and staying in the community. So we already, I guess you would say, own that kind of a mindset, which that's actually a really strong positive for where we are. I have our sales tax number down there. This again just goes through 2024, but we basically are growing, and I believe that's continuing just based on what I've heard at City Council. So steady, not stand out is what I said. So we're doing great, but it's an opportunity for us for sure. So housing, I thought this data was really interesting. We have 1,316 housing units and a vacancy rate of 19%. So that's 257 vacant units, which I thought was pretty staggering.
Where does that figure come from?
There is a housing study in the 5-year estimate, 2024. There's
I
actually
don't
some
know how
housing
that
data
can be
in there.
true.
Yeah, I'm appreciative of what you put together, but I'm kind of like, wow, that's a lot of empty houses. Of course, that could be apartments.
It would be at housing units, so it would
Wow.
include everything, the vacant
Yeah, but
houses.
that's one about every 5 in town, I mean, it's no way.
There may be, you'd have to drive down the streets, but there's a lot of
two or
them
three on
cut.
my
There's a
street.
lot of
There's
them
a
cut.
lot.
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
about-
regardless, we know that we have a high vacancy rate, yeah.
I mean, the aging, I think, is accurate.
Yeah, they just-
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the median home value, it actually jumped, the census number was like around 100, so that kind of jumped up quite a bit. I didn't include this in the study, but I'll give you all a handout on it. I looked at, because obviously we look at sales tax as a revenue source for the city, but then we also have property taxes, which is the other revenue source. And so if you start researching the property tax side of things, it shows like that we are like booming, right? Because we've added a lot of,
Tax base.
tax base. But the truth is, and I'll detail this document, we haven't. We've, 97% of so basically only 2% of Spearman's taxable value growth came from new construction. So the other 97% came from appraisal district raising values on properties we already have. So our community wealth is sort of growing in terms of when you just look at the raw data. But when you actually dig down, it's basically growing on the back of our homeowners because we don't have commercial or business or anything. So when you hear the state talk about local government overtaxing, well, it's not that, especially in a community like ours. It's that these appraisals are just going up like nuts, and we have no control over any of that at all. And since we're a mostly residential, based community, it's hitting our homeowners bad. So that's a real, I thought that was a really interesting, there'll be an article on that soon, because I was actually pretty shocked when I sort of really saw what the numbers were. So anyway, I didn't include that, but that's something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. So basically, and we've known this for years, it's why we did South Park, it's why we've done other things, we've had housing incentive programs. Housing is a barrier for us that we've got to really, probably put some focus on. We just have really old stock, and if you go out to try to recruit a company or a business, that's one of the first things that's gonna be on their checklist of things, to ask about. So, but with vacancy, obviously we have the places to put people, we've just gotta figure out how to get some of this old stuff turned around, so. And Bonnie and I talked about this a little bit earlier, my goal with some of this is just to kind of spur some ideas, and she had an idea, and then you take those ideas and you start to talk to people in the community and see if we can, be creative about how we solve these problems. Sometimes I think we look at economic development and think there's like this special magical thing that, we have to do, but it's really not. It's just knowing our communities, knowing our people, and then finding those opportunities, within us or without, to move, to fix the things that need to be fixed. This next slide is, health, the hospital, which, was important to put in here, but frankly, we're lucky to have a hospital, and so, we do have which Ginger would know, we have critical access designation, which is a huge, very difficult thing for a rural hospital to get, so we're very fortunate and blessed to have leadership there, to make sure. It does identify that, we have 22% uninsured residents, which, is a little bit higher than the state average, but not much. And we do still show a shortage in dental and mental health, which I think we all are kind of aware of, in terms of that. So the hospital is important because it presents, I think, opportunities, for y'all to work, to try to, work with the hospital and coordinate some ways to maybe close some of these gaps. Income and education is the next. Our median income is 68,000, just about 11,000 below the Texas median income, which is 79. Per capita is pretty low, it's 35, still just a little bit below. We actually have a 7% poverty rate, which is quite a bit lower than the 13% Texas. We have a high school graduate rate of about 76% on here. And then we actually have a pretty high bachelor's degree rate of 35% in the community. So those are all important because they help us define sort of what our workforce looks like to another business that we might be recruiting. That way you can sort of work on, figuring out how to, like the college educated workers is actually something that is a real positive. Any questions on that?
So, there was a time, is it Aquatree and Hansford that were blocked off, that were the two of the highest income counties in the.
So that was a study that, I think the Spirit Community Fund do that, or Amarillo Area
No, I
Foundation
just
did it,
remember
yes.
seeing that
Yes.
somewhere.
And I think we'll see that. So, yes, and I think what you can determine from that is that this number is probably skewed, because we do have high wealth, especially in the agricultural
Well, and
community.
that wouldn't be,
Yes, and so that will skew, it'll skew to that, not be able to see that we may be actually like, have a little bit lower in terms of just regular, families. And our ag numbers are, they're actually staggering. I don't think people even have any idea how much money flows around through ag. In fact, I think that's the next slide it is. Almost $899 million is what is Hansford County, and that comes from, there's an agricultural census, so that's a lot of money. 84% of our ag sales are livestock, so, and then we have 107,000 irrigated acres. We've actually lost, there's 137 farms, that was a 2022 number, but that's the last data that was available on this. We've actually lost 24 farms. Basically, what's happening is smaller operators are selling out and larger operators are picking up, so we're consolidating farms. So we're not necessarily losing like farms to industry or anything like that yet, it's mostly just consolidation of farms, which is a little bit better than a data center or whatever, the alternative. And then I put just a little note to kind of think about how ag interplays with what the EDC, wants to focus on. And I think maybe Stephanie, you mentioned this, which is we do have a strong ag anchor, and there's an opportunity there to talk with some of our ag businesses about, are there supplies they need or things that they think we could possibly build businesses out of locally or recruit, suppliers or things like that. And again, that just starts with conversations that probably could yield something. Next slide is who lives in Spearman. We actually are an older aging community. Our median age is 40, where the Texas median is 35. We are officially a majority minority community with 51.6% Hispanic. 17% are foreign born. And then we do have an 82% home ownership rate. That's another pretty strong number, for, a community like ours. Next is the labor market. There's a ton of data that you could dig deeper on this, and I think Bonnie and I talked about a couple of things like commuters. So I think there's more that y'all should, we could dig into on this particular slide. Our unemployment rate is low, which is also, it can be a good thing or a bad thing for folks looking for employees. Maybe it's not so great, but in terms of our citizens, that it is great. We have a $42 million annual payroll. That is an estimate. How I did that? An estimate based off the. There's a. It's off of the 2020 census, so we estimated it up to 23. Our occupation mix, so I provided a copy of this to Bonnie, but in 2015, when I was the EDC director, we did a retail gap study, where we paid a company to do specific data about businesses and kind of where we were losing, businesses, other communities, things like that. So I found a copy of that. Bonnie has it. I integrated it into this section, and then there's one slide on it. It's 2015 data, which obviously is 10 years old, but I don't think it still, I think, tracks pretty well with where we are. And that might be something that y'all could invest in. A company called Retail Coach did that for us.
He's been to several meetings
Yeah,
that I've
probably
been
does
to,
high ground
stuff that he comes to.
And y'all could get a better update on that. But basically this shows us that sales, retail and commercial is 10%, management 9%, transportation and moving is 13%, which I thought was interesting. Farming this is employees, right? So although we have a huge farm, industry, it only employs about 9% of our community. And then of course the school system is that bottom number. My dad always calls Spearman a company town, so we do have a lot of our community is employed by the hospital, the school district, the county, the city, which is nice in terms of those are good, stable jobs, but it also, it's a community that's dependent on government, and that definitely is something that good conservatives may not love that, so that's something to always be thinking about as well. The next slide is school, and this gets pulled from, TEA has a PEAMS report that they put out on the districts, and then there's several work scorecard type things that they put together on schools, so that's where this data comes. I did confirm this 647 number with Layman yesterday. In 2023, we had 100% graduation rate, and that's actually pretty typical for us, so that's pretty incredible.
So what does that mean?
It means that if the kids that enter, like,
The
start of their senior year, they go to completion. So that's how they track that. So that is actually pretty incredible. The other thing that makes that even more incredible is that I sat in a school board meeting at the first of the year, and they do these different demographic reports. And the district, they have 25% of our students are in the English program, the Learning English BSL, or they call it something different now. So 25% of that student population. And so if you think about that, we had 25% of our kids starting not speaking English, and we're graduating 100% of our kids. And that's a pretty impressive situation, in my opinion. The ACT score is pretty low. Bonnie and I were like, ooh, we need to work on that one. That was class of 2023. And I should have put Allie's class.
Yeah. That
There's a
would
lot of smart kids, or
Yeah.
the class after this.
that would have gone up.
Good test takers, so. Student-teacher ratio 10-1, which is really, really great. At-risk students, we have 47%, so that's pretty strong. We're at 67%, so that's the school district population of Hispanic students. 60% of our students are economically disadvantaged. That's a really big number as well.
That is a huge number.
That's high. I thought it was high too.
Yeah. And then our average teacher salary is $50,000, which is $12,000 below the state average. Average teaching experience is 10 years. Of course, I was telling Bonnie, we had a couple of big retirements last year, and this was a 23, 24 number, so that's probably dropped if we run it. And then, of course, we know our crime rate's low. We rank high there's a company called Niche that ranks communities. We rank high, obviously. So yeah, I mean, the school story is a really interesting story in itself, because this data shows us that they're facing some real challenges, and still graduating kids, so it's kind of good to see. And the school plays very large in recruitment of businesses, because that, again, is one of the things that companies look for in a community, so. And I think Spearman's a B-rated school now, so they have dropped in ranking, but it's still pretty good, so. The next page is basically an analysis of that 2015 study. It shows that our leakage at that time is about $39 million, so that's your opportunity. I think our largest leakage categories were, at that time we just shut down the ALCO, right? And so we were exploring how, we used that 2015 retail study we used to recruit, we were trying to recruit Shopco, I remember all of that. And so we specifically had that study done so that we could show them this number. So that has closed a little bit just because Dollar General has, or Dollar Tree, we now have 2 of those. So that might be, we still have a leakage on food service, et cetera. So that's just kind of for y'all to consider. This next section I added because I think that there's a few things that we can't get just from a data gathering census type deal, and that these are these 4 things. One is available sites, and my recommendation on that is that y'all need to have a list of sites available. It's something Bonnie could compile. So that if, you do have prospects, you kind of know where, who's looking to get rid of properties, what might work for them, who the contacts are. And I know Bonnie does some of that, but that would be something that would be worth formalizing. Cost of doing business, we need to know, property tax rates, utility costs, where they hook up for broadband, all that kind of stuff. And the best way to do that is just to compile a sheet that has all that information on there. Y'all need to, in addition to the incentives that you have as a EDC board, your director needs to, and y'all need to be, up to speed on what other opportunities they are out there. And that's why going to this high ground stuff is probably helpful, because that's exactly what they teach you there. And then, the other thing that that only y'all can do is, you need to just basically answer the question, why Spearman? And, have some kind of a formal statement, put together on that. This could be like a one-page document, it could be, another 12-page report, just however you wanted to do that. So the next page is what I call the synthesis. It kind of tells us what's working, what's not working, and then kind of what's at stake. We have strong retail, we have growing sales tax, we have high home ownership, we have low poverty, strong agriculture, and basically a self-contained community. And so those are all things that are working. What's not working is obviously our population decline. That little nugget I talked about on tax base, that our growth is really not new investment. School enrollment's down, no new housing really being built, vacant homes, the healthcare shortages, and then our young families are migrating out. And then obviously that last column just kind of tells y'all what's at stake. Declines will result in reduced services. We need more private investments, long-term healthcare viability at risk, district consolidation, ag consolidation. Basically, your window for opportunity is now. Okay, next page is sort of gets us to this part 3 where we can kind of talk about some ideas of kind of where do we go from here. And the first question is just kind of what kind of growth does Spearman want to pursue? That needs to be kind of the question that I guess has to be answered. So direction, and then, that why, and then we answer that with the why Spearman. So the next page is, I added this, it's sort of a little bit out of kind of sequence maybe, but like for me, the question is what will make our kids come home, right? Because I think that's what we all really want. I want it, I don't know if it'll happen, Bonnie may not get that either, but I think that is kind of what is on most people's minds. So here are some thoughts. Our kids are gonna want a career path, not just a job, right? They need a home they can afford to live in. They need childcare. They need things to do, a social life, especially kids of this generation. They go off and experience those things, and then that's what they want in their world. Entrepreneurship, that's what y'all are doing on your trades and some things like that are definitely opportunities that will meet that criteria. We have to believe in ourselves, right? We have to make investments at the top level so that it trickles down. I think that we need to start, obviously our community's demographic has shifted towards a Hispanic community, and I think that we need to start thinking more about how we are more inclusive. A good school, family and roots, and then we just have to ask them, right? It's kind of that simple. Are we asking our kids to come back home? So this next next few pages are basically knowing what I know about what kind of financial reserves the EDC has. I sort of put together 3 options and based on the data, And there could be a fourth or fifth option based on what y'all see in the data, but this was my illustration. So, you basically have three options. Maintain, which, preserves what you have and provides stability. It keeps us kind of where we are, in terms of a community. Option B would be to focus on retail growth, and your ag business, recruitment, following or updating that gap analysis, to kind of figure out where your opportunities are in that arena. And then the third option is, something that I call destination growth, which is where you create a community that people are coming to, both as, to live and also to, just come and spend the day and shop and, support our businesses. So obviously maintain what we have. This is just tells you kind of what that looks like. You focus on our current businesses, you focus on the quality of life things, and then building out infrastructure. With that, you make, you basically invest in your reserves, and that has kind of been, I think, a conversation. I know Roger's always the one that says, which he's not here anymore, but that says, we need to basically preserve what we have for a future project, and that's definitely one kind of way that you can sort of move forward. So preserve full reserve capacity for future opportunity that the community has not identified. And I just gave you like a little illustration of what you could do with the money if you chose that option. You could invest in events, and then quality of life projects, and then mostly put your operating into reserves for that future project. So that's one option. The second option is to focus on the retail and ag supply growth. The data supports this because of that strong kind of spending mentality that our community already has. And so what you would do is just stabilize the local economy, and then you would focus your spending on, focus your programming on ways to close some of those retail gaps and keep people here in town buying businesses. There's just a few ideas, which we can discuss any of that. I mean, I'm doing all the talking, but if y'all have questions, let me know. Continue to preserve your recruitment incentives. You could do an ag-specific supply chain study. I mean, any of these studies, they can get as specific as you want them to. You could update your retail leakage. Create your Y Spearman housing incentive program, which we've done before in different ways. And then that still leaves you some to keep in reserves. I think with even just a modest investment in sort of this arena, you'll work towards, I guess, slowing down the population loss and possibly even reversing it to where we start to bring people back to the community. Option 3 is what I've told Bonnie is your aspirational plan. Probably it would require deploying the majority of the resources that you have in reserves, and obviously it would have the highest potential for achieving sort of the big economic development goals. And the key behind it is just creating these multiple streams of activity that are bringing revenue back to the community. And even, like, I know I've heard discussions of things like, a meat processing plant or a brewery using local weeds. I mean, those are the kinds of things that would fit in this sort of aspirational kind of project. Because the idea would be that we create opportunities to bring people into the community to spend, whether they're citizens or visitors. This option in particular, I think, has a very strong partnership component with the chamber in terms of kind of the tourism piece of it. That's that.
I do have one question about ag businesses generate sales tax. Most ag anything is not taxable.
It's definitely one of the challenges. But that's why I think, from what I understand, certain things are not taxable, some things are. And so I think it's worth a conversation with your ag businesses that are already here, to get a better understanding of, what is taxable, what isn't, and whether there's some opportunities there. Cause like when they sell the little toys that, that stuff is not that stuff is taxable.
Yes.
So there are products that these businesses are selling that are taxable, and so it'd be neat to just understand kind of.
When I worked at John Deere, and I worked there for over 20 years, I did the sales tax monthly or whatever, and it was just a teeny tiny portion, yeah, and we had toys, and the things that are taxable are just things that you would use personally, but 99.9% of it is not a sales tax situation. And I can't imagine, fuel, any of their diesel is not taxed, seed, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't bring in people that would buy taxable items,
Yeah. I think that's we've talked about this for years. I think it's worth just digging in and trying to figure out if there's something there, because it's just too big of an industry for us, for it not to be. And it's a stabilizing industry. I think when you see, you watch Canadian, they go up, they go down. Perryton goes up, it goes down. We don't. We stay, and so that is also something that is an asset for us as well, is that it's a fairly stable, of course, maybe not now, but it's a little scary right now, but it'll all kind of reset. And then there's also around ag, there's these agro-tourism sort of opportunities, like the local wheat or the pumpkin farms or the, let's start a winery. Things like that. So there are some things around ag that they're doing all over the state that do bring, people to town that would generate sales tax. So those are some things to kind of think about. That's why this is the aspirational page, right? So you have to be aspirational. The next slide is just a comparison. This part 4 is ownership. It just kind of delineates, kind of what role, y'all would be considered community leadership, Bonnie as a staffer, and then you've got your community partners. I've heard in the last few meetings, both here with the city, this wanting to kind of get all the community partners together, and I really hope we do that, because I think that it's time. It's been a really long time since we sat in a room and talked about, that whole, who does Spearman want to be? What are we looking for? So that is pretty much it. Anybody have any questions? The rest of that's just more of the same. So, I guess the other question I'll throw out there is, is there anything that we're missing? Is there specific data that we didn't pull together? Because I can do that too if there's something specific that, somebody was like, I really wanted to see whatever. Bonnie and I already talked about trying to find the commuter data, so like, who's coming here to work and who's leaving here to work, so we'll see if we can
I
find
think
that.
that would
number.
be
Mhm.
really
That was
nice.
one I said today,
to
earlier
find
today.
out.
That would be-
And then I think, as part of your, like, the kind of the marketing document, the Wise Pyramid document, it would be useful to know where people are employed to, so like, how many employees does the school district have? And get all of that data aggregated as well.
I think that would be meaningful data for sure.
And that's just gonna, that's the problem, since we're such a small place. Some of this is just, I call it, local intelligence. You've gotta just get on the phone and call and ask the question, you know. So this doesn't represent a lot of that, but that's really what that kind of next step they'll have to do would be.
Suzanne, accumulating all this data, how can the EDC attract, literally the word attract, anyone? Is it luck of the draw Stratford gets their deal? Is it luck of the draw Claude gets a data center? Is it luck of the draw Booker gets a packing plant? All that stuff, how in the world can we incentivize someone to move in our county? Now, of course, the two cotton gins are huge, but they're not, they're ag, they're the other guys, so to speak. We need tax-based, tax revenue to make a run at all this. Retail, as we all know, struggle. Do we continue to support them with EDC funding to keep them alive? It feels like, sending good money after bad maybe sometimes, but I just don't know I'd just like to have some sort of a idea what we can do, to make it matter.
Yeah, first thing I'll say is, like, Stratford, for example, that hotel took almost 12 years to get done. So one of the things that you have to understand about economic development is there isn't like a fix, right? I mean, and a lot of times it takes work. I mean,
So, but whoever had the idea that we could support a hotel, I don't even know how many room it is, I've heard, I
I
can't.
think it's 8,
You just wonder who had
Henry.
the foresight or the funding or both to pursue that. It doesn't feel like sometimes, and I'm probably wrong, it's my first meeting. Feels like sometimes maybe, I've been on council, we don't pursue some of that stuff.
So look at the location, she's on a highway,
Well,
Yeah,
sure,
but it's
54
on
is,
a third of
Yeah.
road,
54 is
we're not
huge.
a pass, go look at Early, they have almost the same exact population we do, as far as just they may be 500 or 600 more, but they're a pass-through, going somewhere, and so that makes a huge
Well,
difference
it
when
feels
you're,
like
when
we
you're
are
looking at,
a lot.
traffic.
Kathy pursued that because she got direction from her leadership to go get a hotel. So that is, and she worked on it for 12 years, and it was, it was hard. It wasn't like everything just came together. It was a lot of pieces, a lot of people working together, all of that. So, so I think the way to answer that question is, the first thing we've got to do is figure out what we want. And that's the question that we've never really answered. We talk sort of elusively about, go find something, Bonnie, but like, that's not direction. And I think that's what we've been sort of missing is, what do we actually want? What are we willing to pursue? Are we willing to work together to get it done? Are we all, we've gotta all be on the same page in wanting that. Y'all have talked about some really great stuff, but like, I think we're looking for one thing to solve all of our problems, and it's probably not the way it's gonna work. Kathy got that hotel, but like I said, it was 10 years of an investment on her part to do that. And that's usually how those
But
projects
even
work.
getting a hotel like that, and I'm happy for Stratford that they're getting that Cobblestone hotel, but nothing ensures that hotel's gonna be successful.
And that's exactly why I brought it up. It
Yeah.
felt like a huge step for them to try try to make it succeed.
But at least they're on a road that has a tremendous amount
Yes,
of
that
traffic.
is
They have
location
a
is not bad.
crossroads, actually, 287 and
They do,
54, and
they
that's
do, and that
a big
is,
one.
Yeah,
Yes.
but again, in that same thought, who's going to Stratford to spend the night? I'm not, you know?
No, but.
No, we're just.
You may not
we're
remember
just-
that somebody that's
A
traveling.
truck driver maybe, but.
Yeah,
That's where you, like, in
Well-
any business, you've gotta market it out there, you've gotta advertise for it, you've gotta, what's gonna bring them to Stratford, what
You know,
event bring
Perryton
them to
bought,
Stratford?
built 2 or 3, and it feels like there's never any fun in any of them.
Well, and some of that's the court, I mean, those, like the cobblestone in particular, they know exactly where they're gonna get their business, and you can drive all along 287, and there's one, you know, every other town or whatever, so some of that is that, but, and that's why, like, sending Bonnie to, like, these conferences and networking with other people and getting on these lists, that stuff's important, because that is part of it too. So some of it is just, we have to go out and do the work, some of it is luck. Some of it is, you know, a company like the AI stuff, the data centers, I mean, that is them finding the perfect mix and not even really talking to the local government, the local communities about it, which is why there's so much controversy over those. So, I mean, and we've done projects, we've done the dairy, we've done some things like that. You know, it starts with just trying to figure out what kind of community we wanna have. I mean, we have some foundational, this data tells us we actually have some foundational problems we need to solve first. So that could be part of it, because companies have sophisticated ways of looking at our communities that we don't even know about. And so we may not be on anybody's radar because we have some structural issues like housing that we need to address.
well, and I think the housing issue is difficult to address. I mean, I had somebody come and look at something I wanted to do at our house, and he said, why don't you just start over and let us build something new? And I think that's complicated when somebody all of a sudden tells you that would be easier than to remodel something that, for sure, our house is not in as bad a shape as a lot of stuff we have, but there's a lot of things in Spearman that are gonna be hard to fix.
That aging housing is a
Yeah, the
big
medium
issue.
income, all that stuff just
Yeah.
makes it very difficult to
It does.
pursue.
Yes.
But you know, Don, you know, we think about the county and this battery thing coming in. I don't exactly know, but I don't think that's anything we recruited.
No, it's
I think they came here, you know, so that's that luck thing. So it's probably a little lower level stuff we're working on,
Okay.
because we can't sustain
Yeah.
a lot of jobs,
Well,
a lot of
Yeah,
housing.
yeah.
And Brian, you're touching on exactly.
Then the school exploded, you can't maintain it, and, you know,
And we
Stratford's
have to
sweating
have-
that.
Yeah, I mean, they're in trouble.
Well, and I wondered, out of the Spearman School, how many students out of Spearman are, I mean, do we understand how many students left Spearman to go to Pringle Morse? I mean, cause if we knew that.
And River,
And
And
Quick River.
There's about
and
12, I
Fairness.
think, students that
And if
left
we
to go to
understood that would make a little bit of difference. I mean, I get all that matters, for sure. And I mean, balancing the budget of the school, cause they're not getting paid for those students, so.
Well, I
but
think-
on a super simple level,
Yeah.
we have asked for some time just to end our meeting with the time that we talk about what our needs are. I mean, not a big study or anything else, but let's talk. We live here, we know a lot of these things, and we have not done that.
But it's on the agenda to do that. The
Then
very
why are we not doing that? But you know, that's just a simple thing that we could be
it's
doing
on the agenda.
to be on the same page.
To Brian's point, I think that for a lot of years, and not us alone, but most small EDCs, we wanted this big project to come in and save our community. But that, I don't think that is gonna happen, number one, and it's not anything to do with us, right? It's just the reality of the world. And then if they did, it's like my dad said, we don't want the stuff that wants to come here, you know, some of that stuff we don't want anyway. So what Brian kind of is alluding to is, I think that you build in the small things, in the small projects, in the things that the community wants, or, you know, and that is, I think that's up to y'all to be having those conversations, and, you know, I mean, y'all have talked about things like your workforce program, your trades program. I think that's amazing. I just put together the graduation edition for our community, for the newspaper, and there were 4 students at Spearman High School that are going to a trades program. You know, we should know that, right? It shouldn't, so some of it is maybe connecting all the dots and figuring out, because those 4 kids would be exactly the kids that we would wanna figure out how to get back home, and then they would start businesses, and those would be 4, you know, businesses filling a need, so it all sort of works together. So I think more to think about it is just, you know, what do we need, you know, and how, can we start there, and then we start to build this kind of like what we have with Shop at Home. We have this mentality that's sort of ingrained in our community that when an opportunity does come, we'll know exactly what to do with it. I mean, I'll just be blunt and say, if somebody walked in the door with a big opportunity for us, I don't know that we could do it. Because we have some identified structural problems, now they're identified, but we also, you know, we don't work together well in some ways, and there are some things that have to be improved in order for us to get to that next level. And that's just the honesty, you know, because that's what I do. But they're all overcomable if we can just, I mean, I think y'all have done this. You talked about wanting to do this. We've got this data. You're having that June 2nd meeting. There are some really great opportunities ahead for y'all to sort of all get on the same page and do all of that. But, so, you know, and I think like Spencer would tell you the same thing. I think, and that's why we work with him, you know, we put him years ago on, is that, you know, entrepreneurship and starting things here is really one of your best economic development opportunities. Investing in your people right here at home, figuring out how to do that.
You know, Dawn, I think back to, and we've kind of talked about this, but when Perryton Cleaners, they closed a couple of times. You know, and I mentioned it to Bonnie, and I think she did try to reach out to them, you know, and see what's going on, but.
Yeah,
But that clearly created an opportunity. There's a company from Amarillo driving through here to pick up our clothes now. There's a second one in Pampa doing a route here, you know? Maybe that's not perfect, maybe it's 5, 6 jobs, I don't know what Barry used to have. But that's a need, and maybe it's an opportunity that we could talk about.
But I think part of the problem is that continual problem that people want benefits. They don't want to work in a sweatshop type environment, which I really think Gary Cleaners was. I mean, I went in there a lot, and I think it was a very uncomfortable
Well, when I
place
talked to them,
work.
it was, they needed a machine that was worth a lot of money and they couldn't afford, so.
But you know, that business is surviving enough to pay the owner, but it's not surviving enough to buy health insurance,
Yes,
which is so expensive.
It's so
And
expensive,
then to
yes.
provide
Very low wage.
retirement benefits.
I'm not really saying that's a solution, but it clearly was a need for us
It's still a great idea.
and an opportunity.
And I agree.
And those are the
There really-
things
there
that
really
we could dig
isn't
in.
any. No, there really isn't any, so,
Cause I actually looked into that years ago. You know, all these big franchise chains, they'll finance you, build your building, take 20% off the top, your gross, and you survive. You know, some of the big retail, a smaller version of McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, you know, but then you start feeling the ripple effect about, then you got Murmurs, Dairy Queen, all them are like, we can't compete with those. You know, so then it feels like if you're not careful, you squash everybody you're trying to help with one magic solution maybe, or idea. And I think our town could use a dry cleaners without a doubt.
Well, and we need a flower shop. and
But
I'm
you
on
gotta have
that one,
somebody to
so,
have
yeah,
the
but somebody's gonna wanna do
initiative to
it,
pull it off.
yeah.
and I agree.
And
I mean,
those are
it's
the hard people to
that's
find.
the hard
Somebody
part.
that
That's
wants
hard.
to
Yeah,
work.
those are hard to take off, cause what are the first 3 years, you're out, if you don't, so.
But you have,
Gambling with your own money is a is a scary situation.
You have the opportunity to build programs though, and that's kind of what the next piece of that is that, you know, build programs to overcome those barriers and then know that sometimes the stuff's gonna fail. I mean, that's what's hard about, especially because you've got a couple of bankers and accountants, y'all have got a mindset about this is that it has to be, like EDC boards can't be risk averse because that's sort of what you do. Like you have to take a little bit of a
There
risk
is something to that.
in kind of what you know, where you push things. And that's hard because you wanna be a good steward of the taxpayer dollars and, you know, all of that. But then, so what you do is you build programs that are consistent and treat everybody the same way. And then you build clawback systems so that when things do fail, you can recoup what you lost. And as long as you do that, then you're being responsible and you can actually empower with the funds. I mean, you know, go all the way back to 1992 when we passed this, or 1996.
96.
When a long time ago, wasn't it? When the city of Spearman allowed the citizens to vote on collecting this half-cent of sales tax. And its purpose was to build the economic development, you know, environment in this community. And so, you know, that's the mission. And sometimes that isn't as pretty, you know, but that's why you can build infrastructure and policies to protect those dollars and still do the work that you need to do with it. And I think that's where, you know, that's some ways that, I mean, I think our programs, not to say anything bad, because I wrote most of it, but I think our programs might be stale. Like, they may not be delivering on what the community needs, right? And so you have to constantly kind of be paying attention to that. So we have we used to have a housing program. We got rid of it because it wasn't doing anything anymore, but maybe it's time for a new housing program. And it doesn't have to look like the old one. It can look like, you know, the one that we, you know, to meet the needs of what we've got now. So, I don't know. So, I mean, I guess to your question, there's no magic bullet, and I don't know.
I know
that
there's
I
not,
have
it just feels like we need to,
I think the answer
incentivize
is
stuff
in the
to-
process, is in the journey, is in the work, and not necessarily that we can just go pick something out and make it happen. It's the work of economic development that slowly builds what you want. And I know y'all got a study out there now for, like, you know, we've done studies of asking people, you know, what they want, blah, blah, blah. Some of that is important, but also you guys are y'all are on this board because you are people that the city council sees as leaders and connected. And that, like, y'all have the ability to bring that to the table. You're interacting with people every day. And y'all can be asking those questions, you know, as well. Because I think that's how we get there. We're not in a crisis in our community at all, but I do think we're stagnant, and that can be maybe even worse, right? Because we don't see, like, crisis sometimes empowers us to act and make something happen, right? Where being stagnant, we sort of get complacent about where we are, and you know, my opinion is we just need to meet the needs of this community, and there's a lot of them. You know, people every day say they would like more food choices. They would, you know, we need more attorneys, we need more accountants, we need a plumber, so we kind of do know. It's just, those are a lot harder things to make happen. And so, they're gonna take some work, and it's not gonna be immediate. And that's the other problem that's hard, is that, you know, you wanna come to a meeting and walk out of here and go, okay, we did it, but that's not gonna be the way that it works, so.
Well, I think your report is very nice. I thank you for the information. So, for the meeting on June 3rd, are we gonna share this? Well, I mean, what are we gonna do with this?
Is it scheduled?
June 2nd.
Is
June
that
2nd.
scheduled?
My apologies.
There's agendas and,
I posted the agenda today.
oh, okay. Okay. I knew we had talked about it, but I hadn't heard back or since.
So is what's on the agenda?
It just says a discussion between the three entities. What's the rest of
The
that?
discussion of the contract between the three entities.
So this isn't actually on that.
But we can share it. We
I
own
think
it.
we should.
We own it.
No, I think we
Great
should.
information.
No,
Yeah.
I think
Hand
we
it
should
out.
share it. I think it's great information for people to have. Eye-opening information.
I know, I was
That's what I
actually, I learned a lot, I'll be honest. I mean, I really enjoyed it, because I was like, oh, wow.
Well, and I think like you said, it doesn't mean doom and gloom. It means there's opportunities for us to do stuff to maybe reverse some things.
The population decline is the most concerning piece of it. The rest of it, you know, we overcome, but I think the population deal is
Do
done.
you have any clue what causes that?
The oil field
We
would
wouldn't
be
be
part
here
of,
if we didn't
I think the
have.
oil field
I mean, the-
is a piece of it.
There, we have an aging,
That's what I'm saying, feels like that's the biggest maybe
And-
end of it.
there's no careers for people to come here for. There's jobs,
Well, and I just think
But not
about when
careers.
Bill and I got married and we moved here 50 years ago, there was a lot of oil field activity. I mean, you would, Junior Leslie Katz, that business is gone and relocated.
Baker and Taylor,
Baker and
Yes,
Taylor.
was a
No,
huge
no,
employer,
it was
yes.
like Baker and Taylor.
the it, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that is we will always have jobs here, because there's always jobs to do, right? But
Well, and I think over the last 50 years, the Panhandle, people drive to Amarillo 2 or 3 times a week, when 50 years ago,
Yeah,
you
we
bought
didn't
one
do
in
that.
Hardville.
You
And
did.
you've got the
That is
internet,
true.
yeah,
Very
there's a
true.
lot
It's
of,
just
Well,
a
it took
different
longer.
world.
It
and I
took
think
longer, yes,
people-
not as
people
economic
commute,
or,
they
you know,
drive to
whatever.
Amarillo
Yes.
to work.
Dawn,
Or a gas
I'd
truck
kind of
on
be
that.
curious what your wife's opinion was in her position,
As far as,
answering that question.
The school
Yeah.
or.
she has a strong one.
No,
I'll
no,
tell you that.
no, no. No, but I mean,
I
that's
can
a
tell you
unique
that.
perspective, so.
well, in oil and gas.
I'm not asking you.
I know you're not, I wouldn't go do it anyway, but.
But oil and gas goes up and down, and, you know, that's was the demise of Lusby and Baker and Taylor, you know.
Absolutely.
You know, and agriculture will be here, I feel like forever, and I feel like it is our strong point.
I like my ag brewery, or my wheat brewery idea. I think y'all should pursue that one for sure.
So.
Or if we
I
wanna
don't
do
know,
a
well, I don't
wine
know when
industry,
it was
I'm
that
all for that.
Ogletree County brought the Strawman deal in, and I mean,
Yes,
there were
uh-huh.
a lot of people from Hansford County who bought a piece of that, believing in it.
Right.
So,
Well, and that's the other thing is I think we know that we have a group, we have that mindset too, is that there are people that would be willing to support, invest in things. But maybe those may be conversations that we need to be having
yeah,
too.
I think what would be really great is if you had a great big room full of kind of great
Right.
ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Anybody have anything else?
I think that the Tuesday meeting is more infrastructure based with the 3 entities, rather than the brainstorming part of it. And, you know, we get our, what's it look like, you know, and then we figure out what we're gonna have.
But I think to Suzanne's point, everybody needs to come with the spirit of getting along and going forward in a positive way. Because for sure, friction doesn't fix a problem.
We all have the same problems.
And I think in this, on the next steps page at the end of this, I told Bonnie, I said, one of the things that maybe y'all could do for the next regular EDC meeting is, everybody bring 2 or 3 ideas, like Brian said, and y'all can sort of talk about those. And then assign either a board member or Bonnie to do some legwork on that. And I mean, just start there. I mean, sometimes you just start, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of how life is.
Do we
You got
have
a hard thing to
Sorry.
tackle.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wondered, so the new city manager is gonna be here,
Starting on Monday.
okay? And the new superintendent, do we have any idea what the timeline is?
Well, there's
July.
that 21-day waiting
Yeah, they
period.
have to wait, so
Okay.
probably August or
Okay, it's gonna be a minute.
July.
Layman said should be here in July.
July.
Well, thank you.
But we could start that now. I mean, an
Absolutely.
email to the board, send me 5 ideas each, compile those and
Yeah,
vote
I
on
can
them.
send that email out, cause it's right here,
Sure.
so I'll send that email out to y'all.
What do you mean it's here?
Well, it's on this page. Are you talking about ideas? Write down
What-
3
what do you
specific
think our
businesses, yeah,
3 needs are, I mean,
Yep.
it's
I
not,
can do that.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting.
and then compile them and vote on that. We gotta start.
Thank y'all.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you,
Thanks,
Suzanne, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So smarter after doing all that.
A lot of stuff in there.